So this video is a little bit different than what I normally do. As you might know, my normal videos are advice and tips on how to heal from infidelity, unwanted divorce, and the like. Today's video, though, is information about me. First, what it's not. This is not going to be an in-depth story of my own divorce experience. I've actually already shared that. It's under my story parts 1, 2, and 3. And I warn you ahead of time, it's a soap opera. But that's not what today is about. Instead, what I'm going to do is give you just a brief glimpse into my own background as far as what led me to begin to write and to post and share about divorce, as well as some insight into how my own perspectives developed. So first, I am the offspring of an engineer and a marriage and family therapist. So right there, that tells you that I can kind of toe the line between those two extremes. And that's kind of been the story of my life. Between that like overly analytical mindset and then also the more intuitive focus as well. I think at this point, those two aspects are pretty balanced in me. Hasn't always been that way though. So my parents divorced when I was in elementary school. And it was one of those where the divorce itself wasn't all that difficult for me, but afterwards, not that long after, my dad moved across the country. And that was hard. You know, I didn't realize it so much at the time, but that definitely kind of primed the pump, as I like to say, for some of the abandonment issues that arose once my ex-husband left. So it was my mom and I. So I grew up with a marriage and family therapist as the only other person in the household. So, you know, as you can imagine, that definitely helped to shape my view of things. Add to that, I was always a voracious reader. And most of the books in the house were ones geared towards therapists or self-help books. And I think I read every single one of them. I literally read the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, when I was in middle school. So, you know, understanding psychology was just kind of, you know, a fact of life for me from the get-go. Not that I necessarily put all of that into action when it came to marriage number 1. Speaking of marriage number 1, so I met my ex-husband when I was 15. We started dating at 16. And it was great relationship. Again, for the details, see those other videos. During that time, I also became very career focused. I ended up becoming a teacher, which was not what I expected, but you know, life happens. And so I ended up becoming a math teacher. And I just finished my 18th year as a math teacher. So that's been one of those key parts of my life. You know, it's something that takes a lot of hours, and it's something that I really have taken pride in and found success in. So as you can imagine, being a math teacher has kind of done a few things for me. One, it certainly allows my analytical nature to shine, but it also has allowed me to really learn how to cultivate relationships and become an expert at observing people, especially people when they're uncomfortable. Because the thing when you teach math, especially accelerated math, as I currently do, to middle school students, you're always pushing people past their comfort zone. And so that's just been something that I've really, I think, become pretty good at because I've had so much experience throughout the years. Also, I think important to know is I have never had children, and that has been a very deliberate and conscious choice throughout my life. And it's one that I get questioned on quite frequently. You know, people see me at work and they're like, but you're great with kids. Why don't you have them? And there's not an easy answer for that. It's just not something that has ever felt like a need for me. So no kids and happy that way. So for all of my 20s and the first part of my 30s, I identified myself as, wife, teacher, became a runner at 30. In fact, a quick funny story there. I literally had never run a mile, not even in school, until 30. And I had a little goal for myself at my 30th birthday to run a mile. And there's this little park down the street from my house. And I went there the first day, had a 1/4-mile track, and I made it halfway around. And then I went the next day and I made it a little more than halfway, and I kept going and I kept going. And it was one of those where before I knew it, I had become a runner. So that was the 20s and the 30s, and then the divorce happened. So that was, well, we're coming up on 10 years. Actually, just a few weeks from now, it'll be 10 years ago. The divorce was extremely sudden, extremely unexpected. And before that time, I had largely sort of shunned the world of emotions, in my personal life. I was comfortable with that, that factual math-based world. And it wasn't real comfortable in kind of that gray area of feelings. And then once the divorce happened, well, those of you that have been there know you can't ignore those feelings. And it was a really rough patch. And part of the reason it was so hard for me is I desperately wanted help. I wanted resources. I wanted reassurance that I wasn't alone with the particular nature of my divorce. And I simply didn't find any voices out there that spoke to me. Nothing that I read or watched really resonated with me. And so I felt very alone. And so one of my early motivators was I didn't ever want anybody else to feel alone. I also was motivated by a need to sort of spin the divorce. In fact, the moment that I received the text from my ex-husband, I collapsed to the floor. And I was with my dad at the time. We've since developed a great relationship. But I collapsed to the floor. And one of the very first things I said to him, before I even knew what was going on, I said, I need to find a way to make some good come of this. And that took a while. I just kind of shelved that. I was like, oh yeah, that's a nice thought. But I was in pure survival mode for a while. And then kind of adding to all of that, as I was dealing with attorneys and police, they would learn my story and they kept saying, oh my goodness, this look of utter shock on their face, which was kind of disconcerting, to be able to cause shock on these professional faces. They said, this needs to be a book. This is crazy. And so another seed was planted. So that first year, nothing really came of those ideas. It was pure survival. And let me also just say that my advice is not coming from a place of always doing things right. I screwed a whole lot of things up during that year and afterwards. And so a lot of what I have to say comes from living it, experiencing it, and hoping that maybe, others can learn from some of my mistakes. So that first year, again, survival. But then towards the end of that, I slowly started to write. I'd been journaling, and so I pulled from that. But then at that point, my brain was working a little bit better. So, I had enough rational thought to be able to string together sentences. And before this, I never wrote before. I did in school, with the degree programs, obviously I had to write and I was always fine at it. but I never felt compelled to write. It was never something that I saw myself as. It was just, oh yeah, I can do that if I have to, but I'm not going to go do it on my own. But a switch was flipped as I started writing the book, my first book that tells the story. And I started to identify as a writer. It became part of who I was. And in the beginning, the writing was a way of healing. It was almost an extension of the journaling, but it grew way, way beyond that relatively quickly. So a friend actually suggested that I start a blog as a way to, get the word out about the book. So I did that several months before the book was published. And that's where I really started to kind of find my voice, but I also connected with a community of people who had been through similar, and they started sharing their stories, and it became something really, really special. And that's where all of those pieces, all of those seeds that were sown in those early days all started to come together. I felt good. In fact, it was healing to know that I was taking this terrible event and all of this just negative energy, and that I was able to find a way to make something positive come of it. And that just was so invigorating for me. And then it felt amazing to be able to help other people who were also going through atypical divorces, who didn't have other voices out there that resonated with them. And to be able to let them know that, A, you're not alone. And B, as I, was generally further ahead than they were on the healing process, to let them know that you can do this. It does get better. And so those two things really became my primary motivators above needing to tell the story. The story at that point became sort of just a tool, because in a crowded space with so many people talking about divorce and the like, my story was kind of that hook at the beginning that got me noticed. But I don't want to just be known as, the text message woman with the bigamist husband. I mean, that's what happened. That's what started this whole journey, but that is absolutely not who I am or how I identify myself today. So that's really how it all got started, just from that. Now, a little bit about me. If you have been a reader of my blog, you probably have a good sense of me. But if you're new to me or you just watch the videos, you probably don't. And part of that is I'm an introvert. I'm not generally going to be super expressive or super comfortable, believe it or not, with sharing stuff about myself. I'm also extremely type A and prone to anxiety. Not my favorite parts of myself, but hey, it's there, and I've had to learn how to work with it. On the plus side though, I think I'm good at observing people. And as part of that, I'm good at sort of making generalizations and seeing patterns. And then all of the years teaching math to middle schoolers, I get pretty good at taking really complicated and messy ideas and kind of breaking them down into easy to understand chunks. I think that's one of the best skills that teaching helps you develop. So most of my time is spent teaching. I mean, that's pretty all consuming. I kind of fit the blogging and the videos, and I do a little bit of coaching and stuff, and I fit that in kind of around the edges. I'm also probably obsessed would be a good word with fitness and health. You can often find me in the yoga studio or on the running trails or the kettlebells or whatever. I pretty much have to move every day. Part of that is the dealing with the anxiety, and part of it's just kind of who I am. I am an adrenaline junkie. although I'm also pretty fearful. So it's kind of a funny combination. I've been skydiving a couple times and I absolutely loved it and didn't have a lot of fear with it. Yet I absolutely refuse to ride a bicycle downhill because that scares the hell out of me. So I'm a little bit, of a juxtaposition there, I guess. Back to the whole engineer and family therapist for parents. I guess that dichotomy kind of still lives within me. So in some ways, my life now resembles my life before the divorce. I'm again married. I've got a nice house, got my dogs. But in other ways, it's completely different. This marriage is not the same as my first marriage in the best ways possible. I've written quite a bit about what I looked for the second time around and some of the important ways that my now husband is different than my ex. Maybe I'll share some of that in some upcoming videos. But now I'm more aware than I was before. In my first marriage, sorry, camera's shaking because of one of the pit bulls. In my first marriage, I was afraid. I was coming from a place of fear of losing him. And so I wasn't aware of what was going on. And I'm different now. I'm no longer as fear driven. I'm more in the moment and more able to see what's going on. So my life now is wonderful. It's amazing. And it is kind of weird sometimes because in my normal day-to-day life, I don't think about my divorce. I rarely think about my ex or my former life or any of that. But yet I spend, hours each week writing about it or filming about it. So it's sort of a strange place to be sometimes. But I choose to stay in it. At least not all the time, but to sort of keep it as a room that I can enter when I choose to. And the reason that I do that is so many people that write about divorce are coming from one of two places. They're either in the middle of all of it, and so they're still very much experiencing the pain and the heartache, or they are well beyond it and don't remember or won't go back to those early pains. And I try to, as much as I can, express the whole range of emotions. From that moment when you first realize what's happening, all the way to that moment when you realize that you're actually glad that it happened and you're happy that you're on the other side. And I want to end with just a message of gratitude. Because, like I said, I find great personal fulfillment in knowing that what for me was a great personal tragedy has been able to help others. And so I want to thank those of you that have allowed me to get my message out, who have, commented on the things that I have shared, that have supported others, that have shared what I've written or posted with other people that could benefit from that message. And I'm so proud of so many of you who shared your own journeys with me. It's been some amazing stuff going on. And I absolutely love hearing from those of you that are continuing the tradition where you've been through something and you've learned, and then you're passing those lessons on to somebody else. Because ultimately, that's, I think, one of my guiding, beliefs in life is, we're all learning. None of us are perfect. We all are trying to do the best we can, and we're always learning to be a little bit better every day. And I think the more that we can help each other learn and help each other become just a little bit better, I think the better off we all are. So thank you. Thank you for supporting me. And even more, thank you for supporting each other.